What do you think is the secret to a successful relationship?
And that never gets discussed, because if you look at sort of who people select to have sex with versus who people select to try and form long-term relationships with them, I mean, there are many men who would not choose to be with the woman that is most attractive to everybody because they don't have the confidence they could keep her.
That's
right?
a good point.
Even if she's not a flirt and wouldn't be looking, right? Even if she didn't have a wandering eye. Some men deliberately wouldn't want to be with the most beautiful. People tend to match up pretty closely in terms of attractiveness. Like, not always. You asked about income, and I want to make sure that, yes, it's true that resource potential is an important variable, because people have to think about safety and childcare and a number of things, because it's not as edgy as thinking like, oh yeah, it's all about money, it's all about beauty, it's all about this, it's about the Lamborghini. It's like, no, like how is he going to treat you?
Many men are petrified by women. They won't approach them at all. Men get confused with women. They have no idea how to talk to them. They're just petrified into immobility. If you're chronically rejected by people, it's often because of your own insufficiencies. You know, whether that's cowardice or lack of social skills or whatever it is. It's like you can't just brush it off as, oh well, you know, no one likes me, but really I'm okay. It's like no wrong if everyone rejects you. There's probably something wrong, and so the way what the females seem to be doing is using some marker or some set of markers as a proxy indicator.
Because people think, oh, it's all about money. It's not all about money. It's about safety and kindness, because you're talking about a long-term bond.
Right.
Now, then people say, well, what about this notion of gold diggers? And by the way, there are male and female gold diggers, because the last thing you want is someone with a ton of reproductive potential, resource potential, who's going to treat you like garbage. Chances are they're not going to stay with you.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be there, but then they're going to bring in other mates.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you look at the roots of jealousy and concerns about infidelity, or you look at the roots of sort of like concerns about resource potential and all that, it all kind of makes sense in this very old-fashioned model. It also makes sense in the model that we live in now. Kindness toward each other is fundamentally the most important variable, which is kind of reassuring. I don't say that to be politically correct. That's how the data fall out.
Eye contact in a situation where there's a possibility of finding a sexual partner is a very important component of that, because eye contact indicates interest, and it also indicates, at least in principle, possibility of approach, and so approach is dopaminergically mediated, and it's a positive emotional state. And we also know that, for example, with men, if you show them, this is a funny little study, so you show them a view of the face of a beautiful woman and her eyes are looking that way or this way, or they're looking right at him, you can check the activity in the dopaminergic center in a place called the nucleus accumbens, which is the same place that cocaine hits. Face on eye contact, that thing lights up. It lights up even more if she's wearing a red dress, so I think you can derive a couple of things out of this. And this is where I think people are different than other animals. Importantly different is that, so imagine that there's tremendous selection pressure towards the production.
There's also something very special to people about the other person who is very desired by a lot of people, treating them particularly nicely.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, you hear this notion of being picked, right?
Yeah.
And there's mutual picking. And everything's changing now too, right? I mean, the way that there are apps like Bumble where women actually have to say that it's, yes, I will talk to you, right?
Yeah.
It's not a bidirectional conversation. There's an asymmetric conversation.
Yeah.
You have to be careful the questions you ask in a relationship too. You have to make sure you really want that information. And it's not just about people's past, right? If you ask somebody how they really feel about something about you, and they tell you, that may be soothing, it may be intensely stressful. Here's one thing I know for sure. For a relationship to work, you have to be brave. Again, not on the apps, but I'm fascinated by this because it's human dating behavior, but it's always going to be through the filter of biology.
Well, maybe you can answer this. Can the brain outpace evolution? Where we have millions of years of evolution that men say, I'm attracted to these proportions that will nourish my kids the best, and women say, I'm attracted to these features that say he'll take care of my kids. Now society's changing in the last 70 years. Can your brain outpace your evolution, which has been hardwired for millions of years?
Knowledge is power again. This is nothing new here. Intelligence is sexy, it's attractive when a guy knows what he's doing and knows what he's talking about if you can bring something to a conversation. Whether it be passing on knowledge, the curiosity to learn about what the other person is talking about, it makes you more interesting and magnetic to them, which in return leads to a better and more meaningful conversation that she's going to walk away from feeling like you are are the bee's knees.
So we have this real estate in our brain right behind our forehead called the prefrontal cortex, and it's your rule setting machine. Okay, so you can create new rules for what's going to drive your behavior. Like we can decide that what's important in a given set of situations is blank. You actually see this, right? If people go away on retreats or they go to some event and there's only, let's say, again, we're assuming heterosexual relationships here, 10 men and 10 women, they're all heterosexual. Who you find most attractive will be gauged against the other 9, right? Right. And so, but in a world in New York City, right, then the mean is that the distribution is much broader and the mean is shifted perhaps, right? And so you can't beat evolution. You're always going to be constrained by brain wiring, but you can condition certain things. And also sometimes people are selecting for somebody who's really nice, really funny. We get along so well. I mean, there are other criteria, right?
I'm just trying to get you to say it's okay for us to be shallow.
I mean, the reality is that no matter how attracted two people are to one another, like at some point it becomes familiar. But there are certain people, like I'll just disclosure, I'm actually become in a relationship, monogamous relationship, actually become more attracted to the person I'm with. And I think it's something through the nose. It's like a pheromone thing. I become very conditioned to them. It's not that no one else becomes attracted to me, but I become very conditioned to them. I don't know that everyone's like that. I've only been me, but I know that there's some people that get really restless after they've been with the same person for a little while. And sometimes that's psychological, like they never got it out of their system. They married the first person they were with. And other times it could be physiological.
A relationship is a chance to understand yourself and to understand another person, like together. That process is somehow iterative.
The dynamics, right? I mean, you're merging two nervous systems. This was once described to me very well by an ex-girlfriend who's truly brilliant. She's really brilliant. She said, there's 4 arrows. This is maybe to an engineer or so it makes sense. There's how you feel towards the other person.
Yes.
There's how they feel towards you. But then there's an arrow that comes back to you, which is how you feel about how they feel. And then they have an arrow of how they feel about how you feel, right? This is why if someone else is moody or somebody else is upset, there's one version of ourselves where we respond to that, or they respond to us. But there's another version where we respond to that, but it's also, there's a processing of what it means for us that they're behaving that way.
Good, strong relationships are the consequence of people constantly moving through this dependency objectification dynamic, and I use those words in the psychological sense, not in the way they're typically thrown around nowadays, so the ID in some cultures. Men and women will only touch for 2 weeks out of the month, and then for the other 2 weeks, the excitement and the sensuality and the sexuality is very heightened. And then they go back to this kind of distancing. Now, I don't think that's feasible for most people, but if you look statistically, those relationships tend to last a very long time with at least reported mutual feelings of intense attraction for many, many, many decades. So human beings need to learn how to at least understand and control these dynamics.